Great to have a full room. I hope you enjoyed the lunch, and thank you for being here with us on this session on hate and conspiracy online. I work on influence operations, online hate, activism, and trust, so I'm extremely excited to be here moderating this panel. This breakout session is going to build on Plenary 3, and we're going to zoom into hate speech and conspiracy online through the experiences of two esteemed speakers that I have here sitting right next to me. So the title is Hate and Conspiracy, but their presentations and ensuing discussions are going to expand from conspiracy to various forms of misleading information. Now, conspiracy theories, hate, and disinformation are not novel problems, but as also suggested in previous plenaries, their reach and dissemination expanded with the internet. Besides, in times of uncertainty, insecurity, and low trust, such as during wars, pandemics, economic downturns, or natural disasters, conspiracy theories, disinformation, and hate may find fertile grounds to spread. You might be saying we had a bunch of those in the last couple of years, and we'll likely have those and other uncertain conditions in the future. If we take COVID-19 pandemic for an example, as an example, I'm pretty sure that many of you in the audience have at least heard of one conspiracy theory related to COVID-19, let it be Bill Gates being behind vaccination drive to implement chips into people, or those related to the origins of the virus. Moreover, conspiracy theories, disinformation, and hate speech exploit fault lines in societies, and societal fault lines take time and commitment to heal. So as you can see, we have a stubborn problem at hand. But don't succumb to black and white thinking. Because as others in the field also highlight, ICTs and some of the platforms that facilitate the dissemination of and at times amplify malicious, hateful, or misleading content also offer opportunities to connect, learn, and seek help. And as also mentioned in Plenary 3, there are some promising countermeasures that are out there as well. So if we are to cite the examples that we've just heard, in the previous session, Mr. Jaswir Singh talked about how technology could be used to bolster faith institutions and communities. Professor Patrice Bourdeau shared how technology can be leveraged to cultivate interreligious and intercultural engagement. And Dr. Shashi Jayakumar cited some of the threats, while at the same time, giving a number of cases where technology can be used to counter polarization, extremism, or disinformation. So building on these and other examples that you've heard in the course of this conference, in this particular session, we'll be talking about cases, concerns, and countermeasures about misleading and malicious content online. So first, Father Larrey will introduce us to various types of false and misleading information with examples, which will also help set the context. And then Mr. Knier will introduce Integreat, which is a platform that helps refugees and migrants in Germany integrate into the society. After their presentations, we're going to open the floor to questions. So, it's a small room. We're looking forward to receiving your questions. So please don't be shy. Raise your hand, have the mic, and ask your questions. And then we'll have a fruitful discussion on these topics with that. So without further ado, let me leave the floor to Father Larrey.
Thank you, Guli, and thank you, all of you, for coming and joining us for this session. In my introductory remarks, I would like to lay the groundwork for what we're going to be speaking about. Conspiracy theory is an explanation of certain facts that is not based on empirical evidence, but rather on a theory. It's an idea. It's an idea that oftentimes cannot be either proved or disproved. That's the beauty of a conspiracy theory. If you can disprove it, it's no longer a valid theory. If you can prove it, it's no longer conspiracy. So some of the greatest conspiracy theories in recent times have to do with the Vatican. Dan Brown sold 60 million copies of his book based on a conspiracy theory. And there's several theories within the book itself. The primary one is that Jesus Christ had a son with Mary Magdalene, and that started a lineage that went throughout history. And we have all kinds of things going on because it's 2,000 years old. Dan Brown made a lot of money, and then Tom Hanks starred in the movie. But there really is no evidence at all pointing to the validity of this theory. That's why it's such a great theory. The Illuminati, come out of this theory. I know some people who think they belong to a group called the Illuminati, and I said, unfortunately, it's just a conspiracy theory. There isn't a secret group of people in the Vatican that Dan Brown wrote about. Another interesting conspiracy theory has to do with the death of Pope John Paul I. This is now being replayed in the press because on Sunday, Pope Francis beatified Pope John Paul I, who was pontiff for only 33 days and died in mysterious conditions in 1978. So in 1978, this was a huge conspiracy theory. Who killed the Pope, right? Somebody assassinated Pope John Paul I. And to make matters worse, the Vatican did not allow an autopsy to be done on the body. So up to today, we do not know how he died. We do know that he died around 5:30 in the morning in the Apostolic Palace at St. Peter's with a dossier in his hand referring to the Vatican Bank. Now, at the time, the Vatican Bank, and this is not a secret, this is well known, was accused of laundering money. And so the mafia had accounts in the Vatican Bank, and the Pope was about to reform that, and therefore the mafia killed Pope John Paul I. This is the most accredited conspiracy theory referring to Pope John Paul I. So the Vatican is not immune to the idea of a conspiracy theory or even hate speech. But again, take, for example, the death of Pope John Paul I. It cannot be either proved or disproved. There's no way of proving that the mafia killed the Pope, and there's no way disproving it because we don't know how he died exactly. There are good theories. He had a heart condition, and he forgot to take his medicine that night. So that's probably the best theory out there as to how he actually died. But when you have a pope for 33 days, it creates curiosity. Now, let's go to online conspiracy theories. The best place for conspiracy theory online is a website called InfoWars, Infowars.com. And it is created by a gentleman whose name is Alex Jones. Now, you may have heard of Alex Jones because 2 weeks ago, he lost a lawsuit in Austin, Texas, where he lives, to the tune of $45 million. And he is now filed for bankruptcy. Infowars.com has a terrible reputation. And Twitter has banned it, Spotify has banned it, Facebook has banned it because it's filled with malicious stories and hate speech and, of course, conspiracy theories. What's the one that brought him down? Several years ago, there was a massacre in Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. 20 children lost their lives and 6 teachers were also killed. It was one of the worst massacres, in the United States. Every month or so, we have shootings in the States and people die. But 20 children, school children, was a terrible tragedy. Well, Alex Jones came up with an idea that there was no massacre and it was a hoax because the U.S. government was trying to control gun laws. This was his idea. And again, he made it all up. The parents of one of the students sued him for emotional harassment and hardship, and they won. It took about 2 years for the trial to end. And the interesting thing is the website has increased in traffic, and that's how Alex Jones generates money. Is, you know, he sells publicity on his website, among other things like nutritional elements. So even though he lost the lawsuit, the number of people going to his website has increased exponentially. And that's because the man is a genius. He's completely false. It's all made up, but he convinces people that it's real. Another example is Christopher Blair, who hosts a website and also a Facebook page called America's Last Line of Defense. The first phrase that you read on the website is, "Nothing on this website is real." Now, Guli was telling us about misinformation and conspiracy theories. What Christopher Blair and his associates are doing is not a conspiracy theory. It's just a satire. It's like the Onion, which started in the early part of 2000 in Wisconsin, I believe, and now have a great website. And there's nothing real on that either, but the stories are really great. They're almost real. Well, Christopher Blair has decided to create a website which is absolutely absurd, and yet people believe that it's true. And in order to avoid fines and legal implications, he says, nothing on this website is true. And then he proposes all kinds of interesting stories. And he was interviewed by the Washington Post, and he said, what are the 2 stories you're most proud of? But people believed, but it was completely false. He says, number 1, Barack Obama dodged the draft at the age of 9. Okay, this was the name of, I kid you not, this was the name of the article. Barack Obama dodged the draft, which is mandatory military service at the age of 9. The second one that he said got most hits was the state of California enacts the Sharia law, which is the Muslim law that a Muslim state abides by. Well, if you know anything about California, it's the most liberal state in the union. They're having problems passing any laws, let alone the Sharia. And Christopher Blair is amazed at how many people shared the articles thinking that they're real. He has millions of shares every day. And he has about 60 other journalists that think up crazy things, and they put them out there. And for example, he has over 300,000 followers on Facebook, and every morning they look at this stuff and they share it. And he's in the interview, they asked him, what do you do? He says, well, I wake up in the morning, I get my cup of coffee, I sit on my porch, and I say, what absurd material can I spew out today that people will believe is true? The problem of misinformation, and Guli will ask us later, how do we solve things like this? It's very, very difficult. It's very difficult to discern what's true and what's not true. So much so that I know several journalists in Italy who say there are no facts. There are no facts. It's all a matter of interpretation. Look how important misinformation is today. Look at the war between Russia and Ukraine. It's very, very difficult to understand exactly what's going on, even for people who are there. Even for people who are there. Today, there was a news item about the International Atomic Energy Agency, who have sent inspectors to the nuclear power plant, and we still don't know who is shelling around the power plant. Is it Russia or is it Ukraine? Both of them deny that they're doing it. And the inspectors are there and they don't know. So imagine that. And let me close my introductory remarks telling you a brief anecdote. In August of 2019, I was about to enter into my classroom at the Pontifical Lateran University, and one of my students, who actually looks like Guli, came up to, Father, did you hear the news? Donald Trump offered to buy Greenland. And I laughed, and I said, oh, fake news. I mean, with Donald Trump, you never know, but that sounds like great fake news. And it went viral. And I said, isn't that funny? And she says, no, Father, it's not funny. It's true. He called the Prime Minister of Denmark. I didn't know this. Denmark owns Greenland, by the way. He called the Prime Minister of Denmark and says, I will offer you $3 billion for Greenland. And it hit the news, and it was true. And this is, I think, a demonstration of how important it is to be able to check your facts, to be able to discern, to be able to find out what is true and what is not true, and take the time to do it. Precisely so that we can get to the truth and we can actually do well and leave a better society in having done that. And I'll end here, and we'll give the floor to Fritjof, and then it would be great to have a dialogue with you so that we can direct our comments more to what you want to hear.
Thank you, Father Larrey. Fritjof?
Was that 10 minutes?
That was great. Thank you so much. So let me get sorted. I'll be showing a short presentation, but for those sitting in the front and can't really see the screen, it's just pictures, and ideally you can follow my words quite well if I do my job right. So no need to see them. Hello everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Fritjof. I come from Munich, Germany. It's my 5th day here in Singapore. I already fell in love with the country. Reminds me a lot of my birth town, Hamburg, just a little bit bigger, but a big, vibrant, multicultural, multi-ethnic city by the sea. It just, brings up childhood memories, kind of. So what I bring to you today is Integreat, which is just another digital information platform that my non-profit organization developed. Integreat helps refugees and/or migrants to get understandable information upon their arrival in a new city in a foreign country, find counseling and support services, and make connections to local communities. And let me take you on a short journey, starting last week, then jumping back in time, walk back to today, and have a peek into the future. So last week, I bought 2 tickets to a concert of the band Deichkind, which is going to be next year, which is arguably the best live performance of electronic dance music on this planet. The second ticket is for my co-founder, Daniel, because not only were we hearing an album of them during our master's degree and the founding of our project, but the day of this concert will be 7 years after that, exactly 7 years after we founded our nonprofit, the organizational home for Integreat. And let me give you proper context on that year, 2016. At that time, 1.3 million refugees from Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Somalia, and other countries, but mainly those, arrived in Germany. And once they arrived, they had a lot of questions, and helpers from the government, NGOs, or even volunteers could not communicate with them due to the overwhelming language barrier. But those questions were really, really similar across all refugees. It was housing, it was food, and then right next after that, how do my kids get education over here? And no existing institution was capable to provide up-to-date information in multiple languages in a digital way. So why not build a platform? Why not build an app? Because almost all refugees had smartphones. It's how they stayed connected. And provide them with understandable information on their devices. And that's what we did within 5 months. And I need to come back to the band Deichkind just one more time to make a point that will that I need for my presentation. In 2016, they had the song which translates to think big. And that's what we do as startups. We think big. What is the big picture? What is the exit strategy? How do we scale? And looking back on 7 years, a key success factor for us and for Integreat was really to think small. Because small is manageable. Small is focused, and small things are easy to accept. And in social services, especially if it's digital, a small innovation, a simple tool might already be a game changer. And here's an example of thinking small. So we could do an information platform for a whole country, Germany, 82 million inhabitants, or we could do it for each of the 16 federal states, but they are in different sizes. And we could do it for almost 11,000 cities and small villages, or we could do it for 401 municipalities, which are quite similar in size and structure. And so we choose that. And this is what we told each of those municipalities they would get. So we built one cupboard for everybody. And each municipality would get one drawer. And together, the building stands for the municipal government, we have local NGOs, and we have the civil society, ideally representatives of migrant and refugee communities who collectively fill their drawer with information. And on the other side, we have refugees and migrants getting to those information, opening a drawer via their smartphone, via their personal computer, or even print it out for those who are not equipped with devices. We didn't actually show them the cupboard because municipal government's quite boring, and you saw the picture of Daniel and me. We looked like schoolboys, so that was just not happening. And now we just have a picture of the app just to show you. And all cities, all municipalities, they share the same app. Again, keep it small, because small is manageable. And the content right there is created by local experts on site with endless language possibilities. Integreat is a digital bridge for refugees and migrants to their new, maybe only temporary home and the people living there. It's on the Google Play Store, Apple App Store, or via website available. So you already know we need 401 municipalities in Germany to have full coverage of Integreat, and we stand at 20%. But we had 90 separate individual project implementations of Integreat with municipal governments, with NGOs, with the civil society in those municipalities. And at the start, Integreat was only meant to be for refugees arriving in Germany. But over time, it expanded. New information were added and new languages were offered to address foreign workers from other EU member states which have freedom of movement within the European Union to come and work, and Integreat would address them as well. And then in the past 3 years, Integreat became a up-to-date health specialist. We offered pandemic-related information in more languages than any state or federal government or any research institution. And without knowing what impact Integreat had, information campaigns in Germany, studies show that, had the biggest effect on reducing infection numbers. And we did our part. But the pandemic also showed disinformation for refugees and migrants, because it became known that you couldn't get deported if you were not vaccinated. So refugees decided not to get vaccinated in order to stay in Germany, which wasn't true. But we couldn't, even with our platform, we couldn't change their minds. So we still have work to do. So let's look a little bit more into disinformation. So this is how disinformation get to me. They are part of this raging flow of water. And I get so much content, so much information, so many things thrown my way, but I have so many sources to verify them. This is how it looks for migrants and refugees in Germany. It's dry. So if there's an information bit coming, I have a lot of time and a lot of attention span to take it in. So, and I don't have any other sources to verify them because I don't speak the language. That is totally different to how Singapore is communicating. And this holds true for every country in Europe, I would say. It's only the administrative language that is being communicated in. So let's look at who's supposed to communicate to refugees and migrants. It's the government. But we saw in 2016 that they weren't capable of that. They barely touch. There's almost no shared communication space. We have NGOs who offer counseling services, but they have no idea how to use the internet to transfer their knowledge there. And social media is not necessarily a stakeholder there, but this is where refugees and migrants get their information, because there are communities, but they get advice from people living in another country or another state, so their help, the information they get, they don't hold true for their specific problem. So what do? With Integreat, we started to have paid campaigns on Google and Facebook to get the users from there to Integreat. So still giving money to big tech, to the gatekeepers of news, to facilitators of conspiracy theories and hate speech, but we're changing the game a little bit and trying to get the users off of it. And another thing of big tech, there are times when Integreat gets suspended from the stores and it's not made available anymore. And that comes at the same time. Google has given us 250,000 euros to scale Integreat back in 2018. So it's a little bit live by the sword, die by the sword. And that is super, super critical. And now look at the help for Ukraine. Integreat was able to quickly adapt. And what you don't see is in March and April, or in the front you cannot see it, in March and April the access numbers of Integreat skyrocketed. So we saw that Integreat was quickly adapted by refugees arriving in Germany, which is good. And now I'm coming to my last point. And what we're doing with Integreat is we're trying to talk or open up a communication channel towards refugees, talk with them, develop our solution in a way that it caters their needs and their requests. So it is important to talk with them. But I've just recently learned how important it is to talk about them as well. Migration experts say that Putin is also using the refugee influx to divide the European Union, because that is what happened in 2016 and 2017. And right now, Europe holds strong, but we do not know how long that holds up. And then it is about educating the host societies. It's about educating the German citizens, the French citizens, the Spanish citizens, the Polish citizens. And then maybe it is our human kindness that prevails. In Germany, in Poland, in the Czech Republic, hundreds of thousands have opened up their homes to host Ukrainian refugees. They supported them on train stations and with their documents. So do not underestimate the power of our society. And that's my last point. We from Integreat are trying to build bridges for refugees and migrants to the society of their host, which may become their home country at some point. An information bit from Integreat shall always lead to a real-world communication, interaction, a meeting, or some sort of participation. Get them away from the digital, because those connections in the real world between humans, they are strong and they are really, really good. And with Integreat, we're trying to create these connections every single day, one connection at a time, small steps, but we're never stopping. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. I think this brings us to the question session. And if I may warm up the floor with a question of my own, and then we move on to audience questions. Actually, there's one. If I can just use my privilege of sitting here to ask one question before the gentleman over there gets the microphone. That was the first hand up that I could locate. But it's Fritjof, as you were going through your presentation, I was thinking there are multiple stakeholders involved in the platform. So you have refugees, you have migrants, you have government organizations, you have social media companies, then you have NGOs. And then you have the issue of information and investing trust in information. And I was thinking, as people try to invest trust in information, they not only invest trust in the source of the information, but also they need to invest trust in your platform and the sources that they reach through your platform. So that brings me to a rather broader question about trust and its role in countermeasures. So maybe Father Larrey could start with a broader question of the role of trust in countering conspiracy theories and various other forms of misleading content. And then perhaps you can enlighten us on the trust aspect in your platform.
There's a professor at the University of California at Santa Clara whose name is Sally Lehrman, and she has come up with the Trust Project, actually it's called. And what is she trying to do? She has come up with different criteria in order to allow a reader of a magazine or a newspaper to trust what it's saying. Now, the good thing about what Sally is doing is that major newspapers are subscribing to the criteria. In other words, they're joining the project. For example, the New York Times, the Washington Post in Italy, the 5 major newspapers have joined the project. Corriere della Sera, La Repubblica, Il Giornale, who all have a certain bias or slant to what they're saying, but they're all abiding by the criteria that Sally has put out in the Trust Project. And why? Because they understand the moment they lose the trust of their reader is the moment they will no longer be read. So it's to their advantage to join the project and to allow their readership to scrutinize the information in the online or printed version of what they write. Google also has been very careful about trust, and they will tell you you can sign in to your account to Google, and you can look at exactly what information you're giving them and what they're doing with the information. Google has said very and if it weren't true, they would be sued. Google says, we do not sell your information, and that's true. Facebook does, but they tell you that. What Google says is that they have algorithms that will help advertisers look at what you might want to see. And so that's why they're called guided ads, right? But Google is very clear about not selling your information. So you trust Google, or most people do. But the moment that you doubt, you're no longer going to use Google. You're going to use some other search engine. And in my book in 2017, I interviewed Eric Schmidt, who was executive chairman of Alphabet, which is Google's mother or parent company. And he was adamant about that. He says, we've been sued by the European Commission, we've been sued by the United States Department of Justice, and we've won every time. They also have a great team of lawyers. But people wrote to me saying, how can you defend Google? They're stealing and they're terrible. And that's because I was born in Mountain View, California, which is where Google's headquarters is now. And Eric Schmidt asked me, he says, Father, where were you born? We were just chit-chatting one day here in Rome. And I said, I was born in Mountain View. And he said, no, I've never met anyone actually born there. But I was, of course, born before Google got there. But the issue, Guli, thank you, because the issue of trust is vital. It's absolutely vital. If you cannot trust what you're reading, then you're not going to read it. It's not useful information. Let me give a quick example about, and then give the mic over, about misinformation that came to me at lunch today with Fritjof. The ISIS was one of the first to create, and this was mentioned in the plenary this morning also, ISIS was one of the first to use fake videos to their advantage. ISIS sent out video on YouTube before they were banned. And the speaker today mentioned that it's very difficult to get these videos because they're either banned or been confiscated. But they were fake, and they were blowing up monuments that were protected by UNESCO. Now, what was the reason behind this? The reason behind this was to create confusion and to create a scandal so that they would therefore sell on the black market parts of the monument. And that is how they were funding the war in Iraq. The reason I know this is because I have a friend who is on the commission in Italy of trying to find out the black market sale of protected monuments or pieces of those monuments, which are UNESCO sites, heritage sites. These are called deep fakes. A deep fake is an artificial video made completely made up. There's nothing, but it looks real. And I remember seeing these buildings get blown up, and it was amazing, the special effects that they were using. I thought it was real. I didn't know that it was actually false. And we know that they were false because they were selling the monuments on the black market, and they were getting caught. Because especially in Italy, there's a huge black market, but it's also very, how can I say, dangerous. So if you get caught, you go to jail because these are protected sites around the world. Yeah, let me stop there to give time to my colleague.
Yeah, those videos and propaganda from ISIS is a reason why in the big refugee camps, for example, in Jordan, there is no internet allowed. It's blocked out. And that shouldn't be, I understand why they do it, because it's the easiest, most effective way, but we keep people away from information at the same time, so that cannot be a choice either. But talking about trust, so I open up those two avenues, talking to refugees and talking to the host society in order to prepare and educate them. And in Germany, those municipalities that we collaborate with and the stakeholders within, they are the key institutions in order to install trust. Because refugees and even migrants from EU member states tend to have not a lot of trust in their governments, and rightfully so. In Germany, it's not a whole lot better, but a little bit better. But if we go down to municipal governments, this is where the government is close to the people. This is where really strategies are carried out concerning integration. And that is why we need those local integration networks. That's what we call them. It's NGOs working on site, it's employees from the municipal government, it's even small associations like civil society associations and refugee and migrant communities. And if they come together and implement Integreat together, it's a slow way to do it, but it's the most sustainable way, and it's the way, if many people know about it, then Integreat becomes a trusted brand, and information on Integreat can be trusted. But we have to do it on that local, small level in order to achieve it. Because what happened in the beginning and what we noticed, Integreat started in a cafe, which was a waiting room in a counseling service center of an association in Germany. And we showed what we had developed to people waiting there, to refugees. And they did not choose their native language. If they were speaking a little bit of German or English, they chose that language because that is the way they found information before. And they didn't trust information in their language because they were not used to the government or NGOs talking to them in a different language. So we need to have consistent information about multiple languages in order to have trust. That somebody who speaks both languages can verify, all right, yeah, what you read in Arabic, that it holds true. And I think for educating the host society, preparing them that migration is important for the welfare, for the wealth and prosperity of a country, or that we need to integrate refugees because it's the right thing, it's the humanitarian, it's the human thing to do. I think we need more independent media outlets, and I think there is ways to support that. And it's just money. It's just money, and we need independent journalism. We do need more sources for information that we can access. Yeah.
Well, great points. I'm very curious to hear more about the language part, and both of you have referred to the media environment, which was also called on in the previous plenaries as well. And the sad thing is that 2022 Edelman Trust Barometer was highlighting how trust in media is decreasing as well. I think this is definitely one of the issues that we can unpack, but I don't want to make the gentleman at the corner wait much longer, so let's take his question. Maybe we can build on that later on in the discussion. And after that, if you could give the microphone to the gentleman here.
Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you, Father, for bringing Dan Brown in this room on the conspiracy theory. But I believe the Swiss army is not part of the conspiracy theory in Vatican. You mentioned about Dan Brown and in this conspiracy theory, and in particular in this current transactional politics, how to identify the genuine angels and the demons, because now it's really difficult to identify, because angels can be easily transform themselves into demons, and also demons transform themselves into angels. Then where rule of law in this respect? Thank you.
I think the only way to discern is to educate yourself. This morning, the panelists were speaking about critical thinking, and I teach logic and epistemology, which is how to think critically. And I really believe that this is the only way. We teach our students how to use the mind, beginning from Plato and Aristotle through Thomas Aquinas up to today, in order to understand the difference between true and false. Aristotle has an entire treatise on rhetoric, which is exactly how to sift what someone is saying as being true or false. The sophists were the great enemies of Aristotle because they presented falsity as if it were true. Sophistry, that's what it's called, or sophisms. Those are arguments that seem to be true, but they're actually not. We teach this. So someone who reads the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown and it seems convincing has to turn to the material out there in order to realize that it's not. Let me give a quick example. One tradition in the Catholic Church centers around Mary Magdalene. There's an enormous amount of literature about Mary Magdalene because she was the first to see Jesus Christ rise from the dead. That Sunday morning, he visited her, and the other apostles were appalled that he would show himself after his death to a woman, because a woman had no legal standing at the time. Her word was not valid. And that's why they didn't believe her. They said, oh no, he wouldn't have appeared to you first, he would have appeared to us. But he did. That's why Mary Magdalene is often called the 13th apostle. Jesus loved Mary Magdalene. And it's made very clear in the gospel. Now, did that turn romantic, and did they share a son? No. There are apocryphal writings. Apocryphal writings come from the first centuries of the church that Dan Brown used in order to construct his theory. Dan Brown is a brilliant author. He didn't go about this one day, come up with the idea that Mary Magdalene had a son with Jesus Christ. He studied the documents. And there are hundreds and hundreds of these documents that go back to the first century. So most people read Dan Brown because it's fun. He takes you through the Knights of Templar. He takes you through France, where there are supposed tombs of Mary Magdalene and her son. And it's, okay, I've read the book too. It's a fascinating read, but it's not true. See, it's not true. And the only way you're going to find out is by studying this stuff. And I'm sorry, I don't think there's any other way. You have to look at the evidence and the material that's out there and come up with your own conclusion. This is what we insist with on our students. Here is the story. Here is one angle, here is another angle, here's another angle. You have to make up your mind as to what is the most convincing and what is true. But that's what philosophy should do.
Thank you. So the gentleman over here had his hand up, and then we have another person here and here. So we have 2 more questions after that.
Thank you. I'm Zainal Abidin Rashid from Singapore. Formally, I have a question on this cohesion in the context of hate and conspiracy theories. I don't know whether, before that, thank you very much for the sharing. I wonder whether you've heard this conspiracy theory that in fact, the recent tensions between America and China was actually created by ISIS, the extremist Muslim groups, because they want to ensure that there be less pressure on them, distraction, and they created this new tension. I don't know whether you heard of that. But the question related to that is, there's so much attention given to the ISIS and the Muslim extremists. But anyway, before I proceed, I just want to tell you this is something I just cooked up, this conspiracy theory I told you about. I saw
so
you
now we have a new one to take from the room.
I saw all of you so serious, thinking, boring. I think I better say out loud. I just created it just to test you. But the reason I raised that is the most serious question is about how do we look at this issue about understanding Muslims, because the ISIS type and the extremists, they are in a small minority, and they're giving a lot of mess and havoc and uncertainty to the Muslim world itself. The majority of Muslims don't like that and would like to reject them. So what can the world do to help the majority of Muslims to really reduce all this hate, all this conspiracy created by the extremist Muslim groups, so that we can bring about better cohesion? So I don't want you to misunderstand me. I want to say that I'm Zainal Abidin Rashid, former president of MUIS in Singapore, multiracial Singapore. I was almost killed in racial riots in 1964 in Singapore. So Singapore has fair share of racial riots many times. But I rose and went to a conference, international conference in Libya, called by President Gaddafi, where President Gaddafi tried to rally the Muslim youth to say, let's all stick together, fight the non-Muslim world. We rejected that. So we are true believers in harmony, true believers in promoting better understanding and cohesion. Thank you.
Where do I start? But I will only talk about what I know best. But for us in Europe and in Germany, it goes down that avenue in educating the society that already lives in Germany, France, the UK, and all the other countries. It's explaining to them, because the tension that was created in those societies after the refugee influx in 2016 and 17, not all of us really, we didn't understand that the refugees arriving, which were Muslims, they flew because of ISIS. So we had more in common with them, with the refugees arriving than we thought. We have, that is why, and that goes to I think to something we heard earlier today as well. We need to learn about the others. And we need to present what each of our religion is about, and really come down to the point that we're all humans. Because all those refugees arriving in Europe, all they want is peace. They want security for themselves and for their families and for their children. And that is the same thing that we would do in German born in security. Me, born in 1990, a unified Germany at the time, born at a time where there was no war in Europe for 55 years. That's why it is so important that we educate each and every one of our citizens about other cultures, about other religions, talk about similarities in our beliefs, in our religions, and I think we cannot stop there. And if we're talking about educating, like revolutionizing our education system, that's always addressing the youth, and that is the right thing to do, because it's really important, because there's a structure already there, and we can bring out and educate it. We can bring out world citizens at the age of 18, but we actually need to educate the grown-ups. We need to educate the adults, and that's why that is really important. And I have no answer on how we should do that, because we cannot have this kind of conferences for all citizens, but we need to think of a way to educate the adults, not our children, them too, but the adults.
I don't know if I want to touch this point because it's very sensitive. The best conspiracy theories use a lot of data, okay? So the more data that you have that you can point to, the better the theory. For example, Putin has said that the war in the Ukraine is being fueled by Joe Biden because Joe Biden makes money off a war. That's not altogether wrong. Because I looked at the exchange rate between the dollar and the euro. The dollar is worth more than the euro now. And I asked a couple of my friends who live in New York, and they say it's because of the war. It's because America is making money on the war. So it's a very complex situation, but I love the conspiracy theory about China. Many people are saying the Chinese are looking at the way America is helping Ukraine for their own benefit, so that they can gauge what they want to do with Taiwan. And it's a great example. You came up with a conspiracy theory in a matter of minutes, and you had us all thinking. Many people are convinced that ISIS was started by the United States, and there is evidence of that. That the generals went to Iraq and they provoked a group of extremists, and then that's how ISIS started. They even actually armed them in Kurdistan to get rid of the Kurds. So how are you going to understand all of this? I go back, education, study this stuff. Read as much as you can. If you can't visit places, if it's important, go and visit yourself, But in terms of extreme Islamic radicalization, it's an internal problem. And you're absolutely right. It's a small number who make a big fuss. And I think conferences like this are great to understand. The imam that spoke yesterday from Australia was fantastic. I wish he were here because he's funny too. I wanted to ask him what it felt like in the grocery store with, about to check out and get hit by someone. But I was at a conference in Jerusalem with rabbis and imams, and I sat at lunch next to the rector of the seminary in Hartford, Connecticut, for the training of Islamic leaders. It's the second largest seminary in the world, and it's the largest outside of the Islamic countries, let's say. And this is Hartford, Connecticut, for Pete's sake. This is my country are training the future imams. So I think this is the way to go. But it really is a problem that the Muslims have to solve on their own. I think I don't think external pressure helps at all. I think that just makes it worse.
We had 2 more questions. One was Aisha here, and then the lady in red. So if you can start with Aisha.
Thank you, Asha Hemrajani from RSIS. So I wanted to actually refer back to Father Philip and Fritjof, your scary stories that you shared in your opening remarks. I wanted to hear your perspective on the value of fact checkers. So in today's society, there are fact checkers, and they do things like there's this IFCN, the International Fact Checking Network. That's a collection of more than 100 fact checkers all over the world, and they unite together to fight against misinformation, and they provide resources and so on. So I wanted to understand your perspective on what role they may play in maintaining the concept of trust that Guli brought up earlier on. Do fact checker organizations, do they have a role to play? Would you use them? Would you pay them to leverage their services? I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, Sally Lehrman talks about that also. The problem is that they can hack the fact checkers. And if they're good at it, then you're going to be duped into believing that that's true. And again, Sally, one of the things that you said, would you pay for them? No, because Sally says one of the criteria is who paid for that person's information. Okay, so a journalist writes a story, and that journalist got money from Jeff Bezos, let's say. There was, I don't know if you remember, 2 years ago, there was a huge scandal in Amazon because drivers, because that's the big thing in Amazon, drivers were peeing in plastic bottles because they didn't have time to stop and use the lavatory. Well, at first, Amazon and Jeff Bezos had just stepped down as CEO. He remained on the board, and he's the founder. But immediately, Amazon said, fake news. This isn't true. More and more drivers came out, and they even put videos of them doing this. And they've, of course, blurred out because it's a delicate moment in the life of a driver. And Jeff Bezos the next day came out and issued a public apology. Okay? And he said, this is unacceptable. I take full responsibility, and this will not happen again. And he fixed the problem. Okay? So the level of credibility goes way up when someone like Jeff Bezos does that. But the immediate reaction of Amazon was to cover it up. It was to say it was fake news. We would never allow this for our drivers, and that was bad, a bad decision that they made. So I wouldn't pay a fact checker because then you're going to have to ask yourself, what was the reason why that person was paid? But there are a couple of websites that are called Fact Checked, and you enter in a story and it says probability of the story being true or false. Again, the Vatican has tons of conspiracy theories every day, and I could, if you want, I can give you a lot more. And so every now, and I know these people, so when they talk about Pope Francis or cardinals and whatnot, I'm like, this doesn't sound right. But sometimes it is. So to have that fact check, could be useful, but again, it goes back to the trust.
So I think they are, or these ideas are crucial for the, what is important is that if we look at society as a whole, we have to leave all of our bubbles, because we academics are not representative for the society of our countries. That does not hold true. We get to be here, so I flew in 12 hours. It was the first time I flew business class, admittingly. But we have to we have to provide solutions to fact check, to find other sources, to the majority of society, to teachers, cleaning personnel, people working in manufacturing. They need an easy way to verify stories that they heard. And I'm sorry, Mom, to tell this, but even my mother forwarded me a story during the pandemic, and she's a teacher, and you do a master's degree in Germany if you become a teacher. So she's an academic, and she should know better, and that was the only time that it happened, but it does happen to them as well. So we need solutions for the everyday working class, the backbone of all of our societies, especially in Germany. This is where the majority of society holds, and that's why we need an easy way, because we all know how to fact-check stories, but we need easy ways to provide to the everyday man, to the everyday woman, to the everyday human to do that. Yeah, that's why I think that is really, really crucial, all this kind of projects. And then we come to the how to fund them, because if it's governmentally funded, that's difficult. If it's funded by Jeff Bezos or George Soros. So, I mean, we are so close to what the Open Society Foundations of George Soros do, and I would love to get funded, but it would have a backlash, because there are so many conspiracy theories about him as a philanthropist. So that's another question that we have. But I think there might be solutions, but I think they're crucial. They're crucial.
Can I give a follow-up?
Sure.
Can I give I spoke with Janet yesterday about this, and it also depends on how important the story is. Let me give you an example. Donald Trump, of course, has launched the best conspiracy theory in the world, that he won the presidential elections in 2020. Now, this is not irrelevant. This is the president of the United States. So if the elections were rigged, or if there were tampering with ballots, this is important. This is the leader of the free world. So let me give one example that Janet and I spoke about yesterday. Trump lost the state of Pennsylvania, and he lost by only about 20,000 votes, which isn't a lot. There are several million people in Pennsylvania, and the largest county in Pennsylvania is Philadelphia. And Trump said on national television that the ballot counters in Philadelphia did not allow Republican Party observers during the count. Okay, and he used CNN footage, and CNN hates Donald Trump. So Fox News is his big outlet. CNN is against Trump and has been all during his administration. And he says, this is CNN's footage, and what you see is a line of police officers in the ballot counting place and a plexiglass barrier, and then the people counting the ballots. And of course, you see that there are no observers. And that's part of the law in the United States. When ballots are counted, there have to be observers from both parties. Now, what he didn't tell you is that the police did not allow any observers because there were riots breaking out. And therefore, the law states if there is a violent danger, no one is allowed to observe the counting of the ballots. And the police have to surround the place, which they did. But Trump didn't tell you that. You see? And Janet is saying, who has the time to do all of that research? You have to know what the Electoral College is. You have to know what the laws are about counting ballots. You have to know what counties are with respect to cities, because it's not the same. Most people think Philadelphia is a city, but it's actually a series of counties, and the largest county has a lot of ballots that could have gone either way. So here's the point. If it's an important issue, and if it's it's very relevant, like Donald Trump saying he won the presidential election, do the research. It's worth doing the research, so you actually know. Another small item that Trump has never said. I hate to bash Donald Trump because it's so easy, but I'm trying to be objective, and I don't dislike the man. I think he is a fascinating character, but I lost the point that I was trying to make. No federal judge in the United States has allowed any of his lawsuits to go forward. Donald Trump has sued the state of Florida, the state of Georgia, the state of Pennsylvania, Iowa. Like, there's only like 3 electoral votes. I mean, you win Iowa, that doesn't mean anything. And he sued almost everyone for voting fraud. No judge, even Republican judges, allowed any of those suits. They were without merit. Now, you'd say, oh, well, that's a conspiracy against Donald Trump. Come on. I mean, a lot of those judges were Republican appointees. They wanted Trump to win. They looked at the evidence and they threw out the lawsuits. They had no merit. So, you know, when Trump is still saying today, take back America, I won the election, it was stolen, etc. Let's look at the evidence. Let's look at the evidence, and it's not there.
If I can add a few contextual notes before we move on to the next question, because like you mentioned IFCN, and it's important to note that IFCN has certain criteria that these fact-checking organizations have to abide by to be accredited as a fact-checking organization in their network, which gives them credibility. And it's also important to note that a number of platforms are partnering with fact-checking organizations. So they actually do a really hard task, and what they do is extremely important. But we also have to note that it's also a post-effort, so the disinformation is already in circulation, and that makes it a really resource-intensive task for them because they have to respond very quickly. So I have high respect for people who are really like trying to dig out the information and find the truth and then provide it in really great high pace. Perhaps one thing to keep in mind, though, is that, it's good to have the fact check, but some people may have ingrained biases, and even when they're presented with fact-checked information, they may choose not to believe in it. And then other ways of presenting the information and then, talking to them about the accuracy have to be explored, which we can discuss perhaps later. But we have one question here and then another question here. So if we can start with the lady.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Dewi Fortuna Anwar from Indonesia. Firstly, I would like to congratulate Integreat for a great job. I mean, Germany is doing a lot of good things at a time of populist uprisings in Europe. So I really appreciate that. Secondly, a general comment. I agree with, since yesterday we've talked about how to improve education, critical thinking, digital literacy, and so on. But Father Larrey, this is an uphill struggle. I remember I read an article that when they do really clever fakes, in the US, they send, if it's about the Catholic Church, about Islam, or about political, about elections, that's easier to check. But when it's about something like about science, about vaccine, for example, which is much more esoteric, it's not that easy, while the impacts are very pernicious. And I remember they did an experiment in the US where they sent a lot of articles, some true articles, some fake articles to academics, different universities. Most of the academics got it wrong. So this is an uphill struggle. And in Indonesia, they we have, particularly during elections times, this is very difficult. And there was a survey: who are the worst perpetrators for spreading fake news through WhatsApp groups? Civil servants. I'm a civil servant, but that seems like they've got a lot of civil servants, retired people, and housewives. They just read the headlines and then they comment. And in fact, Sashi talk about family group. You don't dare to get out of that group. Within our family group, my husband and my sister-in-law nearly did not speak to each other because my husband corrected her, who is a medical doctor, by the way, and spreading things. And I said, this is not true. And she quit from the group, and it has to have a physical meeting to develop peace and reconciliation in the family. So this is a real. I mean, when we talk very easily about educating yourselves, I mean, if I were to get news about particular properties of medicine, for example, I would know what is truth or not truth. If someone says that Sudafed is not safe for you, it's dangerous, I would know whether it's true or not. So there are certain areas which is not that easy. Now, but my question comes back to this. We talk about the prevalence of this fake news, but how to mitigate the problems, and there have been a lot of talks about the responsibility of governments, of having legislations and so on. But this is also very, very difficult for us, particularly in democratic societies. Because Indonesia introduced, for example, a very draconian information and electronic transactions legislations in response to a lot of fake news and the political conflicts and identity politics and so on. And we felt at the time it was needed. But as a result, a lot of people have gone to jail for hate speech. And we are not sure that they should go to jail, because this can also be used by the state, and it can also be used to criminalize political opponents, to the extent that Indonesia's democratic index has gone down. One of the reasons is because of this issue. So when we talk very easily about, the state has responsibilities, how to create a balance, particularly when, democracy is very much under challenge. And it's not just in infant democracies. In your country, Father Larrey, there's a lot of problems. So I think I would like, I like to give, to hear some of your thoughts about creating the balance, particularly in democracies. Thank you.
And you want the answer with like 2 minutes long, right? So, well, first of all, in the United States, hate crimes are punishable through fines and also going to jail. And the fact that Alex Jones lost the lawsuit and is going to pay a huge fine meant that his First Amendment right, which is free speech, was less important than the effect of what he said on the parents. And so that was a very important court ruling. And so I think this is going to help taper some of the crazy stuff that gets published as if it were true. I would be weary of state-controlled censorship, especially in the United States. That's not going to work. That's not going to fly. But in India, it may. Just because of exactly what you said, it could be motivated. It could be motivated for political reasons, for a political party against the opposition, or vice versa. Again, there's no easy solution, and Guli and I were speaking about this too. There's really no easy solution to this. We're just going to have to keep going and try to do the best we can. Let me give you a quick example that a friend of mine from New York called me the other day, and he said about the vaccine. There's a lot of no-vax people in the United States, and some have even died. I know several that have died because they didn't get the vaccine, and their family still insists that it's a hoax. It's not actually true. He said, "Do you remember 2 years ago when two doctors won the Nobel Prize for Medicine for CRISPR?" CRISPR is a genome editing process that they came up with, and they're actually marketing it now. And the promises of CRISPR are tremendous. They're hoping to cure cancer. They're hoping to cure genetic diseases. They're hoping to cure the common cold because it depends on your genome. Well, here's the conspiracy theory. The no-vaxxers are saying that in the vaccine, they added material that renders CRISPR useless. So don't get the vaccine, because when you need CRISPR, when the procedure becomes commercialized and you can use it to cure cancer, if you have the vaccine, your body is going to reject the procedure known as CRISPR. Now, what is even the greater conspiracy theory is that the powers that be, right, knew how effective CRISPR was going to become within the next generation and decided to create a global pandemic and include in the vaccine enough material, DNA material or chemicals, that would render the CRISPR procedure ineffective. That's a good conspiracy theory. I mean, that's kind of cool if you think about it. But again, most people laugh saying that that's ridiculous, but they'll show you some evidence. Pfizer tells you exactly what they put in their vaccine, and then they say, you know, all these kinds of chemical. I don't understand it. You do. I wouldn't. But then, of course, the conspiracy theorists come back and say, yes, but Pfizer is hiding the fact that they put this other stuff, and we have treated the vaccine, and we came up with traces of this thing that's going to render CRISPR ineffective, and it goes on and on and on, and I wish. Guli asked me about this. He said, "Well, how do we solve this problem? What's the solution?" I don't have one, so that's why I'm going to let Fritjof say what the solution is.
Coming from my gut, which that's basically how we work. No, not really. We do our research. We're quite close to the world of academia still, and it is. So my idea is similar to that on how we implement Integreat. It's bringing experts from different parts of the society together, because we cannot look to our politicians for a solution, because in Germany and in Europe, politicians are part of the problem in some countries and are the major problem in other parts of the parts of Europe, or in other countries in Europe. So I think what is needed, and now I'm addressing many of you, the researchers need to play a bigger role. We need allies between politicians and the research community in order to base policies on research. We need to work closely together with society representatives, and may that be, and there are some projects out there that you randomly choose people from society who form a council for a period of time to make decisions on society, or advise politicians, because politicians are most of the time they are so far away from the problems of the everyday people. Policies will not address inequalities, and I think that is what it all boils down to. The research community is so important, and the pandemic in Germany is a good example, because the whole society got introduced on how research really works, because based on new findings, we have different recommendations. Because in the beginning, we were wiping our phones with antibacterial tissues because we thought that was crucial. But then we learned the disease, COVID, would be transmitted airborne way more often. So that's not the case. And that was new to the majority of society, that, all right, things change based on new findings. So we need to get an understanding of, we can make mistakes, but we need to address them. And that's not a strength of many politicians that I have encountered in the 30 years I'm on this earth. But I still have hope. Especially living in Europe and the European idea. But I think we need to rely more on facts. And we need allies among the research community, politicians, and representatives from the people. And then there's good that can come out of that, I think.
If I can just add one thing on that before we move on to the final question, actually. That is, in the last 5-6 years, especially after the 2016 American elections, we've seen a lot of countermeasures against disinformation campaigns and influence operations come up, both from the legal aspect and non-legal aspect, ranging from media literacy initiatives to establishment of new organizations and as well as government bodies to deal with this problem. But as one recent Carnegie publication also rightly put, one of the things that we're lacking is that the efforts into assessing the effectiveness of these countermeasures remain limited. They're looking at certain aspects of the problem, and then we still have questions with regards to the impact measurement area. And then on top of that, you rightly put that, how do we establish a balance? What are the avenues for citizens to sort of raise their issues with the countermeasures that are being introduced. So that is definitely another aspect that probably needs to be considered. And with that, let me move on to the final question, which is going to come from the middle table. If you could... And we have the timer, so I'll challenge you with meeting the time.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm Raihana from the National University of Malaysia. I'm a faculty member. I teach literature. So, we heard earlier today the importance of stories and story sharing, right? And Father Larrey also talked about Dan Brown's narratives and how it is fun. Reading it, it's fun, right? So as a reader, the story captures our imagination. So I want to ask, what does it say about us as members of humanities that conspiracy theories and fake news appears to capture our imagination? I've been teaching for over 26 years. One of the things I've noticed year on year is with young adult narratives, there's a kind of shift, into dystopian fiction, right? So, and one of the things, and my teenage daughter tells me the same, that these are the kind of stories we like to read, Mommy. I said, why? It's like they're so disenfranchised by society. So I'd like to hear your thoughts. What is it about us, the adults in this room, that when a gentleman over there tested our minds with a theory, a conspiracy theory, we gobbled it up. We didn't even think about it. So I would like to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
But in our Zoom conversation, and there's only 2 minutes left, but in our Zoom conversation, I asked Guli the same thing. I said, why are we so interested in conspiracy theories? And I think Fritjof also said, because the truth isn't sexy. It's a way to explain reality in a different mode than that is, shall we say, obvious or more conducive to truth and how reality is truly. There's something in us that thrives on the strange concept, or aliens visiting us and abducting some of us and telling them stories, and we love to hear that because it's a fantasy and it gives us an alternative reading of reality, which strikes us as more fascinating.
Yeah, and taking your conspiracy theory as an example, they give an answer to a highly complex question most of the time. So the tension between the US and China is happening on so many levels. There are so many events that have led to where we are right now. And pointing the finger at one organization is an easy answer to this very, very complex maybe question or happening. And I think that is, and because we as humans and we as a society, we hate to admit that we don't know everything. And so with that easy answer, well, we can imagine that we know, but we really don't. And I think that's rooted so deeply in us that we hate to make mistakes. And yeah.
And on that note, perhaps one takeaway for us, or a question for us, is how we can, or how we should frame the truth and the ways in which we should deliver them in a way that reaches a lot of people. And it would be the best if it reaches before the dissemination reaches people. I mean, disinformation reaches people. 90 minutes on the stage. So with that, please join me in thanking our speakers. And thank you so much for your questions. They were all very insightful, and I hope you enjoyed the session. Please enjoy the rest of the conference.